all know what happened at Bonaro Island. Ace found Blackbeard, they clashed, and Ace lost. That defeat set off one of the biggest wars in One Piece history. But what if Ace had actually won that battle? The Blackbeard pirates launched an assault on the small Bonaro Island, where Ace finally caught up with Blackbeard. Sitting atop a building, Ace was met with a greeting from Blackbeard, who addressed him as his former commander. However, Ace took offense, seeing it as mockery after Blackbeard's betrayal. Ignoring the tension, Blackbeard proposed that Ace join his crew so they could capture Straw Hat Luffy together. Ace immediately rejected the offer, revealing that Luffy was his younger brother and vowing to protect him from harm. This revelation surprised Blackbeard. Van Ogre fired his rifle at Ace, but the bullets passed harmlessly through him. In response, Ace struck back with Hygen. Jesus Burgess then hurled an entire building toward him, but Ace incinerated it using his Hibashira attack from the Mera Mera no Mi. As Blackbeard shouted for his crew to fall back, knowing they stood no chance, Ace launched his Hyken, striking all of them. Rising to his feet, Blackbeard ordered his crew to evacuate the town, declaring he would handle Ace himself. He then began to reveal his motives for killing Thatch, cloaking himself in a shroud of darkness. Portgas D. Ace stood tall, shoulders rising with each breath, his chest heaving. His flames danced wildly around him, flickering gold and crimson like a living inferno. Across the field, Blackbeard grinned while shrouded in darkness, and the fight finally began. Ace launched his flames, and Blackbeard tanked the attack and felt the sting, but immediately after, he absorbed them and showed Ace what his power was. The two duked it out, and both suffered heavy damage. Blackbeard's coat was ripped up, and his chest had been burned up. He had taken a surprising amount of damage, but his durability was at an unnatural level. The air seemed to pulse because of the opposing forces of blinding heat and suffocating darkness. The ground beneath them trembled as they charged again. Ace's fist blazed brighter than ever before, flames coiling around his body like a solar storm. Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi warped the very reality around him, pulling light into his grasp like a black hole. When they collided, fire and void erupted in a cataclysm of clashing forces. Trees vaporized. The sky cracked with thunder that wasn't natural. There were waves of pressure from the hockey of their clash, but Ace was determined to put an end to Blackbeard. Not only for Thatch and his crew, but also because he had planned to go after Luffy after this. Ace went burning through the mess of a battlefield like a blazing comet and launched columns of flames that were melting the rock and turning it into magma. He was like a streak of orange light as he soared across the sky and launched attacks at Blackbeard. But Blackbeard was relentless, and he dragged every attack inward. Ace had to counter with hockey whenever his flames and intangibility were nullified because of the darkness, but Ace began to adapt. He knew the split-second timing. Every time Teach tried to cancel his flaming body, Ace responded with sheer speed and explosive movement to dodge Blackbeard's attacks and then counter with his own, filled with hockey. He was getting better in the middle of the fight. He propelled himself with blasts under his feet or dispersed into fire and became tangible again just beyond Blackbeard's reach. Blood dripped from both of them. Their bodies were pushed to the brink. The ground had become a total mess with craters and molten hot pits. Ace gathered his energy, rising into the sky in a spiral of fire, conjuring a massive burning sphere above him. It was a lot like an artificial sun had come down on the earth, and it was brighter than anything the island had seen. The temperature scorched even the clouds. Blackbeard responded by opening a gaping maw of darkness above his hand, a swirling abyss pulling in the very light of Ace's sun. The final clash shattered the heavens. Ace hurled his sun downward with every ounce of power he had left, and Blackbeard released a vortex of dark gravity that swallowed it whole. For a second, nothing but silence. Then an eruption. The collision tore apart the atmosphere, vaporized the soil, and hurled both combatants away like broken ragdolls. Ace hit the ground first, his body rolling, steaming, smoke rising from his shoulders. Blackbeard landed next, cratering the ground, motionless. Ace groaned and pushed himself up. Every inch of his body hurt like nothing else. He walked towards Blackbeard as his fire flickered around him after being all weakened. But Blackbeard lay flat on the ground. A bunch of his bones were broken and his skin was burned. The darkness seemed to ooze out of him. Ace was about to land the final blow as ash rained down and blew in the wind. But then something happened all of a sudden. The darkness within Blackbeard's body began oozing out before suddenly turning into a spike. Before Ace could react, the darkness pierced his heart. Ace gasped. His veins turned pitch black for a moment. His eyes flared. For a second, everything went still again. Ace tried to release his flames, but instead of fire, something completely different came out. Darkness! Teach's body shriveled as he died because his devil fruit was no longer inside him, while the air around Ace seemed to warp. The very air warped around him. The Yami Yami no Mi had chosen him. It hadn't died. It had transferred, as if it was seeking a stronger host than the one it was in originally. Ace stood, still scorched, still bleeding, but something had changed. Flames curled gently around his shoulders. The darkness spiraled beneath his feet like smoke, and everything went silent. Ace had won, but the devil fruit felt unnatural in his body. He would have to bring it under his control or risk that it would consume him. Portgas D. Ace had survived. With Blackbeard's defeat, the delicate balance of the world began to shudder. Ace was supposed to have been captured in the original timeline, and that led to the gruesome events in the war on Marineford. But this time, that didn't happen, and as such, Marineford wouldn't have to see the massive amount of death it saw. The world never saw Whitebeard fall from trying trying to save Ace, and Ace wouldn't have lost his life either. The seas were never split by his final quake. Instead, Edward Newgate remained alive, even though he was still old and sick. His heart burned with pride as Ace arrived on the Moby Dick, having defeated Blackbeard. The black flag of Marshal D. Teach was torn down before it could ever rise. Without the chaos of Marineford, Blackbeard never obtained the Gura Gura no Mi. His ambitions of replacing Whitebeard as an emperor died along with him. Sengoku would remain the fleet admiral, and Sakazuki and Kuzan would never have their fight. Not just that, so many of the Marines who lost their lives would still be alive. A war had been narrowly averted, but in its place, a storm of a different nature brewed, because Ace had gained a power unlike anything the world had ever seen before. Rumors began to swirl across the seas because of Blackbeard's remaining crew. The rumors were so outrageous, though, that no one seemed to believe them. But then, as Ace traveled, the rumors began to carry more weight. Ace was now in possession of 2 devil fruits. Panic stirred in the halls of Mary Joaz when news reached it. The 5 elders debated behind sealed curtains. If left unchecked, Ace had the potential to rival Goldie Roger himself. The son had followed in his father's footsteps, and now he possessed a Logia that was considered the strongest Logia in the world. His control of both light and void, of burning creation and devouring destruction, made him the most dangerous pirate of his generation. The Yami Yami no Mi was known as the devil's most sinister power. Now in the hands of a man already capable of incinerating islands with his Mera Mera no Mi, Ace was no longer just Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander. He was a living weapon. To deal with this and test Ace's power, the Marines began launching raids. Battleships began skirmishing against him, led by vice admirals and even some CP-0 agents. Most of them were stopped by Whitebeard's massive crew in his outer territory. Even the ones that came close to Ace didn't make it out alive, though. The Whitebeard pirates were no longer just defending territory. They were defending a future Pirate King's bloodline. And while the world churned in uncertainty, the brothers trained. Beneath the shadow of the Moby Dick, Ace completely threw himself into training under Whitebeard to somehow get a handle on his 2 powers that seemed so different. Mastering 1 devil fruit took years of discipline. Mastering 2 was something that had never even been done before. The fire within him still obeyed his call. The Mera Mera no Mi was a part of his soul, but the darkness was something else entirely. It didn't simply burn or crush. It pulled, devoured, and overwhelmed, and it made devil fruits completely useless. While training under the commanders and Whitebeard himself, Ace began to learn to control the powers of the Yami Yami no Mi. It was extra difficult because it seemed like it kept smothering the powers of the Mera Mera no Mi, and Ace had to find the perfect balance to use both of them. His haki began getting better, and Whitebeard even showed him how to use advanced Conqueror's haki. Ace learned to manipulate his darkness like a second skin, coating his arm with shadows to drag his enemies in close before erupting with hellfire. He could smother entire battlefields in the pitch black void and reignite them in a blaze of severe flames. Ace knew that his brother would be working hard somewhere too. After the Straw Hats had been separated by Kuma, each awoke on a different island across the world. Luffy had been sent to Rusukaina, where he had to deal with Boa Hancock and the Kuja warriors. But somehow, his charm ended up with him making friends with all of them. Luffy found out that his crew was sent to different places, but they were safe. So he asked Boa to help him send a message across the seas to them that they would meet in 2 years. During this time, Rayleigh paid a visit and he took Luffy under his wing. Luffy had a tough time dealing with the fact that he was so weak and what happened at Sabaody. But now, Rayleigh would train him himself. Their training began with silence, observation haki, armament haki, conqueror's haki. Rayleigh broke Luffy down to his essence, showing him the raw truth of haki and the nature of Logia abilities. With Ace still alive and stronger than ever, Luffy found himself chasing his brother's legacy as he found out about the rumors and how Ace had defeated Blackbeard. He trained against beasts 3 times his size. He meditated in the rainfall and darkness. He sparred with Rayleigh in brutal, punishing bouts that left his body broken and rebuilt daily. He honed his Gear 2nd until it no longer drained him, and he extended the time period he could use Gear 3rd. Not just that, Luffy began to build up a new form, Gear 4th, a power of elasticity, speed, and crushing force born from relentless instinct. And every time he felt weak, Luffy would look at Ace's Beaver card and push himself even further in his training. 2 years had passed since the events at Banaro Island, and the world had shifted quite a bit. Pirates and Marines alike had begun to fear Ace, who had made a big name for himself. Even the other Yonko were wary of his movements as they saw how quickly Ace had begun to build his name after completing his training. His command over his dual powers was now terrifying. Ace could launch fire lances that exploded into miniature suns or summon gravitational spheres that collapsed enemy ships into themselves. His bounty soared to 1.4 billion berries. Across the world, on the Thousand Sunny, Monkey D, Luffy smiled as he looked at Ace's wanted poster. He had completed his training and had become taller and stronger. His muscles had become bigger and more defined, and his body had scars from the extreme levels of training. The Straw Hats had finally reunited, and all of them had become stronger. Though Whitebeard never fell in a war, his body had worn away from age and illness. Soon after Ace had completed his training, Whitebeard finally passed away. His death was mourned not as a tragedy, but as the sunset of a legend. There was no battle for his throne, no chaos among his crew. They already knew who was going to take his place. Ace's flames would crackle in one hand, while darkness darkness covered the other. He was recognized all over the world as a Yonko. The territories of Whitebeard remained untouched, held by iron loyalty and the fearsome presence of a man who wielded both the sun and abyss within him. The pirate world whispered of him as something more than a Yonko, a man dancing on the edge of becoming Pirate King. But far to the east, the land of Wano suffered under tyranny. The Straw Hats, having reunited and grown into titans in their own right, carved a path through the twisted landscapes of Orochi's regime. Old allies returned, samurai raised their swords, and Luffy, now a seasoned warrior, his haki burning with will, stood at the gates of Onigashima. Kaido the unkillable dragon waited. A lot had happened before Luffy had to face Kaido once more, from being brutally beaten to training his haki. But now, the final fight was upon them. He wasn't going to be alone this time. Ace had heard of the war. Without hesitation, Ace left his fleet in Marco's hands and soared into the clouds using his flames. It didn't take Ace long to reach Wano, just as thunder cracked in the sky. The worst part was that Kaido wasn't alone, and his ally was none other than Big Mom herself. Her monstrous laughter shook the cliffs, her homies wreaking havoc on the battlefield. Zeus roared with lightning, Napoleon cleaved steel like butter, and Prometheus raged through the sky like a miniature sun. But then, fire was met with fire. Ace descended from the heavens in a vortex of darkness and flame, landing between Big Mom and the Heart Pirates with an explosion that flattened 100 beasts. Prometheus lunged at him, but Ace simply raised a hand. The sun homie collided with a wall of living flame, and for the first time, Prometheus screamed in pain. Ace stepped forward, fire swirling in spirals behind him, his hand dripping with darkness. Big Mom turned wide-eyed, and then Ace lunged at her. Big Mom hurled lightning bolts and summoned tidal waves of flame as she hit Ace with Napoleon in her hand, but Ace matched her blow for blow. Flame spears were launched through the air as they clashed against the homies and pierced them before Ace used his darkness to nullify them altogether. Big Mom wasn't going to go down easy though. Her haki was immense. Each of their attacks clashed together as they both began using only haki to duke it out. It was amazing to see. Ace had reached the level of a Yonko and was physically fighting against Big Mom, who had abnormal levels of strength. She tried to crush him under her weight, but he met her charge with a conflagration so hot it turned her battlefield into molten glass. Napoleon came down, but Ace caught the sword in his hand, darkness absorbing the blow, and responded with a flaming roundhouse kick that sent her crashing through a mountain. Still, Big Mom was relentless. She got up on her feet, and her conqueror's haki began pulsing out from her anger. Kid and Law watched with open mouths. They had intended to deal with Big Mom themselves, but they didn't think they needed to lift a finger right now with her fighting against another Yonko. While Ace was dealing with Big Mom, Luffy was fighting his own battle with Kaido. Just like before, Kaido overwhelmed him, but Luffy was standing his ground much better than before. His allies supported him, while Luffy used his advanced conqueror's haki to bypass Kaido's scales. But Kaido wasn't going to go down easy. The entire land was in turmoil, but things took a turn for the worse when Luffy was sent flying into the ground and was left unconscious. But then everything changed as his heartbeat began to beat like a drum in his chest. His heart danced to a beat ancient and divine. Luffy got up as his body began to float, and he began laughing loudly. His black hair turned shimmering white, eyes burning with life. His straw hat flapped behind him as his entire form became a cartoonish, surreal embodiment of joy and chaos. Luffy had awakened the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. He called this form Gear 5. Luffy bounced into the sky, grabbing Kaido's dragon form by the nose and swinging him around like a toy, slamming the Yonko into mountaintops with exaggerated force. His punches bent the air, his limbs defied physics. The battlefield became a canvas for chaos. When Kaido blasted him with fire, Luffy's stomach expanded, absorbing the blast like a balloon before launching it back with explosive force. For a moment, the tides turned. Luffy was the sun in the sky, laughing, burning, dancing, but Kaido was not done. He rose again, battered but berserk, fueled by rage and desperation. He unleashed his full power, lightning storms, wind sides, flame clouds of catastrophic scale. Luffy was still fighting with him on even grounds. The balance would soon be broken though, as a spear of flame was sent towards Kaido and hit him in the back, causing his massive body to stagger in the air. Ace had arrived! His presence rippled across the battlefield. Flaming black wings burst from his back, born of the Yami Yami no Mi. His eyes glowed with intensity, his fists lit with both radiant flame and crushing darkness. As he landed beside Luffy, the ground cratered from the sheer pressure of his dual powers. The two brothers grinned at each other and commented on how they both looked so different, and then they turned their attention to Kaido. Ace launched forward, black flames tearing through Kaido's wind slashes. With his left hand, he summoned darkness that pulled Kaido's dragon form down. With his right hand, he unleashed a solar inferno that ignited Kaido's tail in a blazing vortex. Luffy followed up, stretching his limbs, growing into a giant for a moment as he smashed Kaido with comical but devastating punches. His fists ricocheted like rubber thunderbolts, breaking the very clouds. Kaido reduced his size and got into his hybrid form before striking back with his club coated in advanced conqueror's haki. Ace blocked it with his arms, and then the two brothers struck back once more. Luffy spun his arm, forming a comically massive ball of Ace's flames in his hand, while Ace charged his own darkness, spiraling into a singularity at his palm, covered in blazing orange heat. Luffy's fist stretched across the heavens, while Ace Ace suddenly took a step back. He knew Luffy would be enough. As Kaido looked up at Luffy, his fist came crashing down, hitting the Emperor in a massive explosion that caused a shockwave to fly across Wano. Kaido was sent hurtling to the ground. It was finally done. The great beast had finally collapsed. Luffy floated down to Ace and told him that he didn't even need his help while laughing. Ace seemed to agree, saying that Luffy probably could have beaten Kaido without his help. He smiled brightly, realizing how strong his brother had gotten. After the fall of Kaido and Big Mom, the world shifted. News of their defeat traveled really fast and reached all over the world. Luffy had been crowned an emperor, and now the world had two brothers who were among the strongest. This wouldn't be good for the Marines at all. Sabo saw the news, and his mind flashed suddenly. He remembered who these two were. They were his brothers. Luffy tells Ace about his next destination. After learning that he was going to Egghead, Ace chose to come along as he wanted to meet Dr. Vegapunk. As such, he joined the Straw Hats for a bit. But things were going to take some twists on their journey, and the truth would be revealed. Much like in the original timeline, once the world government found out about Vegapunk's research into the Void Century, they went in after him. But this time, two Yonkos were present on the island. A buster call was initiated, and Kizaru came with marine ships to eradicate the island. Not just him, Elder J. Garcia Saturn was there as well. The island soon devolved into a battlefield, but Luffy, Ace, and the rest of the Straw Hats were easily dealing with the Marines. Saturn had transformed into a massive yokai, and Kizaru was beside him. Suddenly, dark magic circles appeared on the island. The remaining elders had arrived. Jigarcia Saturn, now in full Ushioni yokai form, his legs dripping venom, his eyes glowing with a life-ending gaze. Topman Warcurry transformed into the colossal, steel-bodied boar yokai, radiating haki and wrath. Marcus Mars, a massive, flaming, bird-like entity, wings spanning across the island. Itsumaid, spewing fire that devoured air. Ethan Baron Fifinus Juro appeared as a skeletal centaur demon, galloping with underworld speed and wielding the cursed Shaddai Kitetsu wrapped in deathly ice. Shepherd Jupiter turned into a titanic sandworm yokai, devouring land and enemies alike as he tore through the earth with apocalyptic force. Each radiated a power that warped reality. The Straw Hats scattered to defend the island. Zoro locked blades with Nosjuro. Sanji protected Vegapunk. Frankie and Usopp manned the defenses. But at the heart of it all, Luffy and Ace stood side by side, unblinking as the elders approached. Saturn launched first, his venomous legs cracking the ground, attempting to pierce Luffy, who had already gone into Gear 5. He laughed and bounced out of the way, stretching his eye sockets cartoonishly to mimic Saturn's gaze before launching a haki-infused kick that shattered Saturn's horn. Ace clashed with Warcurry, his flames clashing with the beast's haki-infused roars. The Boar God charged, but Ace used a massive explosion to divert his charge into a mountain, but something was wrong. The elders kept regenerating each time they took damage. Luffy didn't understand what was happening, but Ace regrouped beside him. He was going to use his ace and told Luffy to stick with him. The two launched forward at Saturn. Luffy distracted the yokai as Ace swooped in and grabbed Saturn's face. He poured a vast amount of darkness into him, and suddenly his form wavered. Luffy saw this opportunity and punched Saturn hard from beneath his abdomen, and the elder suddenly lost his transformation. Ace used his other hand to send flames into Saturn's body, and the elder simply burned? The Yami Yami no Mi had nullified all of his abilities. The other elders watched in shock and surprise, but the tide had turned. Mars lunged at Ace, but Luffy defended him. Ace covered the Bird Saint in darkness before Luffy punched him hard in the abdomen, shattering his ribs. The elders realized what was happening. To protect Marcus Mars, Kizaru moved in at light speed, but Luffy caught him and sent him flying. The remaining elders retreated in an instant. They had already lost two of their members. Any more would cause the balance of the world to crumble. With Ace and Luffy occupied with Kizaru, the elders used their magic circles to retreat back to Mary Jawaz. Vegapunk had been saved, and the truth had been told to the world. But more importantly, the world government had taken a blow unlike any other in centuries. Two elders had fallen, and an admiral was out of commission. And news had reached the world about the rising sea levels. The balance of power had shattered. Ace understood that his power was something that even the elders could not deal with, and it made him among the strongest in the world. And from the shadows, Emu watched. What comes next would not just be war, and the world government teetered on the brink. Following the massacre at Egghead, chaos erupted. The Revolutionary Army launched full-scale assaults across the globe. Dragon led the final march. Shanks focused his attention on Mary Jawaz. Even the nations once loyal to the world government began to rebel. Soon enough, all-out war began as Emu launched a weapon on Egghead that destroyed the entire island soon after Luffy and Ace had left. This was the spark that ignited war. Numerous pirates gathered up in alliances under Luffy and Ace's banner. Even Shanks and the revolutionaries joined in, along with the Scabbards and the Mink. In the skies above Mary Jawaz, a storm unlike any before twisted the heavens. The air itself crackled with centuries of hate. At the heart of the Holy Land, seated on the empty throne, was the one no one truly knew, Emu. The Alliance arrived on Mary Jawaz, and war broke out against the Marines and God's Knights. It was a battle unlike any other, and three Yonkos were on one side. Eventually, Emu himself had to appear. They rose as a cosmic force wielding an ancient power from the Forgotten World, and yet the Alliance opposing them had already gone through the Elders and represented liberty liberation. Imu rose into the air, obliterating entire plateaus of the Red Line, but it was met head-on by Ace, whose Yami Yami powers swallowed the void. Luffy, Ace, and Shanks met together against the ruler of the world, and it was a massive battle that felt like it lasted for days, even though it was merely a few hours. But their combined might, Ace's nullification, Luffy's freedom, and Shanks' sheer power soon ended with one final gambit. Luffy held the world's hope in one fist, Ace, gravity, and fire in both palms, while Shanks launched himself forward, drowned in haki. Together, they launched a combined attack that hit Imu and shattered him completely. The world was free. Ace stood, bruised and bloodied, but still burning. The man who carried the will of Whitebeard. The man who had saved the world alongside his brother. He bore 2 devil fruits. He was a Yonko, a legend. Luffy, too, was exhausted, but he grinned as he looked at Ace. Shanks took a step back as he watched the new generation. The 2 brothers had to finally decide who would become the king of the pirates. They leaped onto a plateau on the Red Line and faced each other. This was their moment. Ace was the first to strike, unleashing massive columns of flames as Luffy lifted into the air and grabbed them before throwing them at Ace. Ace nullified his own flames with his darkness. Luffy was bouncing around as Ace leapt toward him, and the two began zipping through the air as haki clashed. Luffy took a step back and grabbed the moonlight before twirling it into a whip. Ace retaliated with a solar implosion, pulling the battlefield into a firestorm vortex, suffocating even light. Luffy was pushed to his limits, burned, crushed, nearly broken, but he laughed, always laughed. Ace did the same. The two were going at each other like enemies, but their smiles said otherwise. Then Luffy began to fight differently. His moves became freer and more unpredictable. He kept dodging Ace's darkness while knocking away his flames, and soon he began glowing like the sun. Ace faltered, not because he wasn't strong, but because Luffy was truly unchained. With a final, spinning, absurdly huge punch, Luffy struck Ace as he blocked with the entire might of his darkness and flames. Their haki caused the island to crack. As the two were knocked down, they lay flat on their backs. Ace laughed loudly. He declared that Luffy had won. For more One Piece content, make sure to subscribe and smash the like button.